like stuff, Arizona. That's always cooler. So it's 2:02, Ben. So let's get it started. Why don't you?
Yep, we've got to stabilize at 73. So we'll jump in, but welcome everyone to Waterwell with Seawell. Awesome presentation today. So we have Adria Dent. Just some background information on her background. So she's been doing a lot of things with native plants for quite a while now, and she originally got interested in native plants when she was doing her undergrad work at UC Davis, and she worked there in the Arboretum for a time and became interested in native plants and propagation at that point. I thought this was cool. She worked as an architect or landscape architect in England for some time and then returned back to Utah. So I imagine that's a little bit of a different shift for landscapes. She used to be our Seawell program coordinator for some time. So she worked for USU for a little bit as well. There's some publications, and I'll probably put links to those in the chat. One of them's a PDF that you can access, and the other one is a book. So Combinations for Conservation, which is it's a really neat book. If you haven't had that one, I do recommend that one to people quite a bit, on grouping different plants together in a native landscape or native type plants. And then the other one is Native Woody Plants in Utah, or vegetative propagation for those. And then currently, Adria works in a wholesale nursery in northern Utah. So anyways, if there's anything you want to add to that, you're welcome to, Adrian. We'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. As Ben mentioned, I did previously work for Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, and it's fun getting on this call right now and just seeing all the names and that I recognize too from being in the industry for a while. So I'm really excited to talk to everyone today. So I think it sounds like Ben kind of went over my background, so I won't add too much to that, except for to say that I'm happy to be back and in the nursery industry. And I've started with perennial favorites about a year ago, so pretty new to this position. I don't know if any of you know where we're at, but we are just in northern Utah in Layton. So I've been working here as taking over from Kent Miller, who is going to be retiring soon, and he's the head grower, and I'm going to be taking over on the perennial side of things, which is the plants that I love the most. So here's kind of what I'm going to go through today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the nursery and where kind of its background a little bit, and when we started growing native plants. I do want to define native plants a little bit as well. I feel like that's something that has a lot of different connotations to it. And then I'll kind of talk about those in the nursery industry. So kind of some of the challenges and things with propagating them, and then also talking about growing them in the nursery setting too. And then we've also got a trial bed, a pretty extensive trial garden that we've got just extended as well. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. And also another new thing that we've been working on is working with Richard Anderson on introducing some new native plants into the industry. And then finally, we'll kind of go over some cool plants and where to buy and find some of those. So go ahead and get started with that. So Perennial Favorites was started in about over 30 years ago. Preston Cox and his wife, Melissa, started it. And right now, as you can see from the picture, and if you know Northern Utah, let me just show you. This is the new West Davis corridor that used to be just out here in the middle of nowhere. This nursery, I grew up in Kaysville, just up the road, and 3200 West was about as far as anything was out here. But now we're completely maxed out. So this is our property right here, and we've even extended outside of our property a bit. So we've got 14 acres under production, 27 greenhouses, 10 cold frames, and then we've got a new site in Garland that we are expanding up to too, since real estate's kind of at a peak out here. So we're still growing. That's going to be kind of focused up in the Garland area up in Box Elder County. So this is a picture of that. Many of you probably know Bill Varga. This is Bill Varga right here and his son, Ethan. A couple of our growers, Caleb and Tim. This is us on the coldest day of the year when we decided to go up there and check it out. This is up in Garland. So we've got an acre up there under production and about 19 more that we can kind of expand into. So a lot of the ones that we're going to be working on up there are sort of these native type ones, plantings that we want to expand our catalog on. And also a lot of the, we do perennials and annuals and a little bit of shrubby woody stuff, but mostly it's just perennial favorites. So mostly perennials. But if expanding and having this area up here will allow us to do a little bit more that can take a little bit more time to finish up, like woody plants and natives and stuff like that. So just a little bit about our customers. We're wholesale, so we just sell directly to garden centers. We don't sell directly to the public. We sell to garden centers and landscapers. And as the things kind of shift around, it seems like we are selling more to landscapers now, which does change a little bit about what we're growing. A lot of those are kind of pre-ordered as well. So that makes up a little bit more of our customer base right now. And then we also grow for High Country Gardens. It's an online retail company. So we grow for them and they ship and take care of all the online fulfillment and stuff like that. But a lot of the natives that we grow are for them. And that's kind of that's opened up a lot more for us too, as far as time of year when we grow and what we can grow as well. So, and different sizes that we grow. So we grow those in a little bit smaller because they're going to be shipping for landscapers and garden centers. We usually grow those in gallon pots, and that's about as big as we go. We go up to 2-gallon pots too, but we're not doing trees and shrubs and stuff like that. So the areas that we do cover are obviously Utah. Now we've got a lot of customers in Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. So if you can imagine the different types of plants that would be native to those different areas, a lot of that is kind of the Intermountain West that we consider as natives. And then we are opening up a little bit more into Colorado as well. It does seem like a lot of like nurseries are changing and wholesale nurseries are kind of going out of business, some of the smaller ones. So that market seems to be changing a little bit too, which is kind of fun and also kind of a challenge as well. So I kind of wanted to just start with defining what native plants are and why we use them. Let me just shift this so I can read. So I feel like it can be kind of a touchy subject sometimes and difficult to define. So thinking of natives, like I live up in Logan, Utah, but thinking of just even going up the canyon, what you'll find native up there versus coming back down here to Layton. And then kind of expanding that definition to like Utah natives, which would incorporate a lot of Southern Utah and desert type of plants. And then the Intermountain West opens it up a little bit more. Western US, you've got some more water type plants too, some more like Pacific Northwest and stuff like that. And then obviously like North America opening it up to like plains type of plants and a lot of cool wildflowers that you might find in the North American prairies. So it is kind of a broad, but also it can get really specific too, depending on who's defining it. And also just thinking about different elevations that you grow stuff at, even in the same geographic area, just going up in elevation, how much things can change. So I kind of like to think of it more in terms of the purpose that you're using those native plants. So kind of the ecological role. So I did work in between Seawell and here. I did work in restoration, stream restoration type work for a few years, and that's another type of plants that we don't really grow for, where they're going to be doing like restoration and reclamation, where they're sourcing seeds from that site where they really want it to be exactly what was there before, whereas native, like planting natives for more of an aesthetic reason, for just looking for that sense of place. So let me just show some of those, like honoring the spirit of place. So this is just up in northern Utah. Like if you get to 6,000 feet, you're going to be up in aspen areas, and that looks a lot different than if you go down to southern Utah, where you're going to be looking more at desert type plants. So one of the reasons that people like to use natives is just that, to give the look of that regional aesthetic too. And that's, I mean, I think all of these reasons are valid reasons to use them, and they don't all have to be for the same reason either. So some people, when they think of using natives, they're talking more about water conservation. And I think that term also gets mixed up, and I'm not a purist on it either. Like I have a lot of, I don't just have natives in my garden. I have a lot of drought tolerant and drought adapted plants as well. So sometimes those words are kind of used interchangeably, like drought tolerant, drought adapted, water wise. But when we really think about where a lot of our native plants come from, you are thinking about ones that, you know, if you're thinking about drought tolerant plants, a lot of the plants that we find really cool are ones that are found along stream beds and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that they can't be adapted to drought as well. So a lot of the streams that we have in Utah are more ephemeral, or, you know, they have a high spring runoff. So they'll be adapted to that really wet period, but then they can also go pretty dry. For example, like dogwood and elderberry, those ones can handle a lot of water, but then when it dries out, they're still doing well too. Another reason that people like to use natives are for the pollinators and wildlife. So thinking of monarchs and like Asclepias and a lot of very floriferous plants that attract butterflies and caterpillars. One thing to think about when using these too is just, I think, another aesthetic that people think about when they think of native plants is often it looks weedy, and kind of just a term that you use. It doesn't necessarily, well, that term has a bad connotation to it, but I don't think it necessarily needs to have a bad connotation to it. Just these wildflowers, they might be a little more lanky or sprawling. They're not really selected for landscape cultivars, but they'll have the purpose of being attractive to pollinators, which is what you're going for too. So a lot of these are kind of just a different mindset when we're thinking about what we want as natives, and you know, kind of the traditional, very manicured type of lawn, or if you really want something that is more wild as well, and something that reseeds, where it might drive someone crazy to have a plant that reseeds and you're constantly pulling up flowers. But other places or other people might like that aesthetic. So kind of just a different mindset for the different types of purposes that you want to use your natives for. So another thing I kind of wanted to touch on was just like straight natives versus hybrids, cultivars, and a newer term that I actually haven't been that familiar with called nativars, which is just, so cultivars are cultivated varieties. So something that's selected and promoted for expanded flower colors, you know, like showier colors, sort of different, a little bit unique look to it, maybe longer flowering time. Some of them have different foliages, or they just kind of have a different form to them. I think a lot over the past few years in the nursery trade has been trying to have things more uniform and more compact. You think of some of the like echinaceas or gaillardias and stuff like that, and what they're the newer ones are always a little bit more compact and more well behaved in the garden too, which is fine if that's what you want to. A lot of the like the straight species are just a little bit more lanky and a little bit more wild looking. So I think there's room for all of those in there as well. And then also selecting for disease resistance too. So something to think about when you're comparing straight cultivars or hybrids, or just straight native plants, maybe from seed. There's some research, and it sounds like the jury's kind of out on it, on nativars being less attractive to pollinators, but research is ongoing on that. So, so I'm all about using all of them, kind of just depending on the purpose that you're going for. If you're going for aesthetics, drought tolerance, pollinators. So, so now that we've defined native plants, kind of just talking about some of the issues getting them into production. So first I'll kind of go through propagating some of the native plants, and then the next step is growing them on in the nursery setting. So in propagating any plants, the type of propagules that we use are seeds, unrooted cuttings, plugs, division, or tissue culture. And some of those are just a little bit trickier when you're talking about doing that with natives. So a lot of this is fireweed, Camerian. This was, I think, the third time we sowed that, and we got one. So sometimes just the seeds of, I don't know if it's just the source of seeds or finding a consistent source that you know is going to have a high germination rate. And just also propagation protocols on that too, trying to find different seed treatments that you might do on it, whether you're doing GA or smoke water or something like that, and just trying to test it to see when, you know, what works the best on that. So some of that is just finding a consistent source too, where you know that's going to work. Another way that we propagate native plants are from cuttings. So that was actually kind of one of my first jobs when I worked at the Arboretum and UC Davis, was going around to all the cool plants out there and taking some cuttings and then sticking them and trying to propagate them for, we used to have a plant sale and stuff out there. So that's kind of where I really got addicted to working with native plants. So a lot of times for most of the rest of our plants, we can always get cuttings in or get things in as plugs. But these ones that are trickier to find are not as common in the industry. We're going to be using stock plants. We're going to be using our own inventory and stuff to take cuttings up. So maintaining those mother plants adds another dimension. Just the timing of when to get cuttings of those too. Some of those are a short window of when they are viable for taking cuttings. So the other way that we do them is through plugs, and those just come in basically in like these type of trays right here where they've already seeded or plugged them, and we buy them in and plant them up. And that's a little bit trickier with native plants. There are a few native plant producers that you can buy some from, but even they have issues. You know, sometimes we'll order a bunch in and we'll just get a total crop failure from them, and we're stuck with what we get. So the availability and consistency, or, you know, they might only have a certain number available and stuff too, because they can be trickier to grow. So there are a few issues we run into. This is one of the ones that we stuck from, and I think we mostly just got the timing wrong on it. So we tried it a few weeks later and it seemed to work a lot better. So it does take a lot of time and trial and effort and kind of keeping track of that too. So, but it's all stuff that we're learning and trying to incorporate into our next season as well. We've also done a little bit with tissue culture. Some of the bigger crops that we get come in as tissue cultured, either where they're just basically cuttings, or they come in as tissue culture with little roots on them too. So the main issue with trying to find things that are native that have been tissue cultured is just the minimum order amounts that they need to do that. A lot of these are contracted offshore, and you need like 20,000 cuttings to be able to do it. So just kind of some of that making it worth your time. We are doing a little bit with USU to work on trialing a few of these to see if we can get some tissue culture media that works for some of the natives that we're looking at too. So kind of some exciting stuff to look forward to. And as we learn, we're trying to keep all this stuff and put it all in a propagation protocol database. It's kind of a newer thing that I've been working on since I've been here too. Kind of playing off, this is the book that Ben was mentioning that Larry Rupp and I worked on when I was at CUL, called Nurturing Native Plants. So we just went through and collected a lot of different methods that were already published, and some of the stuff that Dr. Rupp was working on as well. So we try to use as many resources as we can, not reinvent the wheel each time. And some of these are, the Native Plant Network has a really good propagation protocols database. And then I've also been working with the International Plant Propagation Society, which has been really great to work with. They have kind of a mission statement of seek and share, which sometimes in industry is not always the mode of operation. So it's nice. Everyone's trying to learn and share the information that they've attained from their successes and failures too. So another thing I just wanted to mention real quick, I went on a tour of the Utah State Prison a few months ago, and they have a greenhouse and like a greenhouse management growing operation down there. And since they are run by the state, they do restoration and reclamation projects. So it's a little bit different output that they have, but they also work on a ton of native stuff for restoration types projects. So, and they have a great database too. So I've been working with them a little bit, and we're gonna go take another tour and see what they're learning. So a lot of information out there, just kind of making sure, trying to collect it and make sure that we get those protocols in place. So once we've got something propagated, once we get to that stage, there's a few challenges and issues with actually growing those native plants in the nursery setting that might be a little bit different than traditional plants. Some challenges. So sometimes the watering requirements, a lot of natives are a lot more drought tolerant, and also not just more drought tolerant, but a little less susceptible to being overwatered too. So they're can be a little bit picky, to be honest. They don't want it too wet, but they don't want it too dry. So trying to find places in the nursery where they don't get overwatered. So often we'll actually just have them outside of the nursery, outside of our typical beds, where they just get a little bit of overspray, but they're not getting the same amount of watering that the rest of the plants might be getting. So another issue with some of the more shrubby natives are the growth rates can be quite a bit slower, not just slower than perennials, but slower than other shrubs and stuff as well. So some of the Mahonia, not really the red pens, but the Mahonia like Fremontii, those ones can be very slow going, and we put them into tiny 3.5-inch pots, and 2 years later they're still in tiny 3.5-inch pots. So kind of thinking that's a little bit tricky to grow sometimes in a nursery setting when you can have things in and turn them around, and thinking of just what you could sell in that space in that amount of time too. It's not always cost efficient, and not always a way that we can charge enough for that to make it cost efficient. But as I was saying before, we have bought some more land up in the Garland area, and that gives us a little bit more room to just put some stuff up there and let it do its thing, where we're not worried about such high turnover rates and stuff like that. So kind of thinking a little bit differently about those. So the timing of when things are sold too, a lot of some of the cool season grasses are a little bit trickier to sell during the times when they actually look good. And that doesn't mean that you can't sell them. It just means that, if you're selling them to a retail customer, their garden center, they're not going to be able to sell them as well. So kind of how things look in pots, like just for our customers, the variety of customers that we have. So if you think about selling it to garden centers, it's got to be able to fly off the shelf right then. Landscapers know how it's going to look eventually, so they can just throw it in. And then also just talking about growing for high country gardens, that's a little bit of a game changer too, because the times that we ship to them, some of the times we'll just actually ship stuff dormant. So for example, this is Asclepias. This is one that I have in my yard that I actually got in as a mail order as a dormant plant, and it looks great. I mean, you've seen Asclepias, they take over the world. I probably put it in a little bit of a wrong spot, and it is taking over my whole yard, but I do get monarchs and caterpillars and stuff on it, so it's kind of fun to see. But this is how it looks in the pot in a nursery. So it is not the best looking plant. We're always having issues with chlorosis. It's funny that I find it kind of ironic that the stuff that is the easiest to grow and the weediest in a yard can be the hardest thing to make look good in a pot. So, which is often fine for shipping because the gardeners might be a little bit more educated about what they're getting and knowing that it's going to be dormant and or looking, not great. It's not usually flowering when we sell these or anything like you would want to at a retail center, but knowing what they're going to get eventually, I think is really important thing to think about. So landscapers, and I think a lot of the online retail clients might be more aware of that tricky one. So the other challenge that we kind of face is just that little chicken and the egg of we have natives. Are they what people want? So I think a lot of times people will say they can't find any natives and trying to buy them from the nurseries, and the nurseries will contact us and we say, well, we have all these natives, but those maybe aren't in big enough numbers or maybe aren't the natives that they're thinking of. So it's a little bit kind of tricky throwing big numbers out there of something that you don't know if people will really want either, but you kind of have to have enough numbers so that people know you have it. So a little bit of a conundrum there, but still worth working through. And I think as we get more and more customers that are pre-ordering and we get more landscapers that are doing custom orders ahead of time, I think some of that will shift as well. So we've also got a trial garden, which we've had for quite a few years now. I actually started when I started at USU 10 years ago now. I remember coming down here to Perennial Favorites, and they were quite a bit smaller then, but they've put in these trial gardens about 7 years ago, and that was a project with USU to try some of these. I think they were trialing a bunch of Agastaches and maybe some Monarda at that point, and it's expanded. So right now we have along the north end of our property, we have 1,000 linear feet of trial garden, and that's 6,000 square feet. So we've got that as trials for both annuals and perennials, but then also as stock gardens as well. So the trial gardens, we've got a perennial trial garden that we use to compare different selections. So often we'll get samples from different vendors or suppliers that want to try new or different cultivars or different selections of the same genus. And then also, this is an example of our penstemon trial area right here, where we've just got a bunch of different, I think we've got penstemon penifolius in there, and there's maybe 4 or 5 different penifolius with different colors, different shapes, or different sizes. Some are a little bit more mounding. So kind of just seeing how those perform in the landscape. And I think one of the things that's fun, I mean, I came from a design background and a lot more plant on the ground sort of background. And then working here, I think a lot of the people that worked here haven't actually seen the final product once it gets past the 3.5-inch pot or the gallon pot that we send them out in. So it's kind of fun having that out here, and people come out and go, oh, I didn't know that plant flowered, or that's what that plant looked like. So kind of fun to try that out. And then another thing we like to show out here is just testing cold tolerance. And it's not super scientific. We just throw them out. If they die, they're not cold tolerant a lot of the time. So some of these borderline ones, we're at a zone 6. So kind of checking them out there and seeing some of these cultivars are a little less cold hardy than maybe the rest of the species is. So and then we've also got them set up for different zones, so different irrigation zones, so we can kind of test the drought tolerance on that as well. And then just using it to look at what the plants look like, if they're garden worthy, if they are weedy, if they are lanky, if there's something that is kind of a red flag on those too. So just basically making sure that the plants that we sell and that we want to promote are good plants for the garden. So we've also just extended the garden in this last year and added a stock garden. So these are a lot of plants that are more exclusive, that we maybe can't get cuttings of, or we only have a few plants of ourselves that we use in our propagation house that we use for cuttings and stuff. So kind of just having a backup of some of these plants, and also maybe some of the shrubbier plants where we don't want to have a lot of plants in our propagation house that take up too much room. So having this kind of as a backup resort as well. And it's also doubles as a trial garden too, seeing if things survive as well, but just having that propagule source for those. And then another kind of exciting thing that we've, well, actually perennial favorites has kind of always been involved in kind of promoting different newer plants, or if they find sports of plants, using those as what we call perennial favorite standouts, and kind of ones that just are maybe a little bit different. Like we have a pink Sauschneria that's kind of cool. But the last year we've started working with Richard Anderson. Many of you may know him. He was at the USU Botanical Center with Sago Supreme. And he's been working with us on introducing a lot more native plants into the plant industry. So not only native plants that maybe aren't currently in the industry, but selecting different strains of ones that are in the industry for just different colors or different form. So this is one that we've been promoting a little bit more, called Solidago multiradiata, and this one's going to be called Cassia Gold. So this is Richard out in the field. He's gone out on a few plant exploration type trips this summer, and everybody is jealous of his job. So he has a list of plants, where they are, what he wants to select when, and kind of we've gone through a list of cool plants just to make sure that this is something that we think everybody would like, that we could sell. So the next step is to go through and make sure that we can propagate them, and then make sure that we can grow them in the plant, in the nursery setting as well. So here he is out taking some cuttings of Penstemon petiolatus, and then he collected all these cuttings and we stuck them, and they rooted 100%. They looked great, which doesn't always happen. So this one I think will be a pretty easy one to propagate, and now we'll try to grow it in the nursery setting, and then we'll move on to trying it out in our trial gardens, and kind of, trying it with everybody and seeing if it's something that will catch on. But it's a pretty great little plant. This is Penstemon petiolatus. I'm sorry, the last one was petiolatus. This is Penstemon ambiguous. I think this has been in the nursery industry before, but he's found some pretty cool pink centered flowers as well. So we're trying this one. This one he did collect a bunch of cuttings, and we had 0% cuttings. So we're going to try again and try those ones from seed. But he's going around different times of the year and planning his trips around when the cuttings are available, when seeds might be available as well. So that's so that's the Penstemon ambiguous. So now for the fun part of, let me see how much time I have left here. So one of the parts of this talk was about, everyone asked where they can get native plants. So I wanted to spend some time on how it kind of works, and where to find them. And then we'll go over some cool plants that are generally available, and maybe some cool ones to look out for as well. So, so we are a wholesale nursery. So we sell directly to retailers and landscapers. So a lot of times the customers can really drive that just by asking retailers, and then the retailers ask us too. Wholesale or retailers can, and a lot of our program has changed to a lot more custom orders recently too, or a lot of our availability is already pre-ordered too. So if you look at our online catalog, or not our online catalog, but on our main page, we just have our availability for the week. And sounds like it used to be pages and pages and pages of availability, but people are, I think maybe because of the pandemic, people are ordering a lot more in advance, which is sometimes trickier for us because we have to time it so that they're ready to go. They look good at that certain time that they want it. But it's also nice to have things that we know people are going to buy and are already ordered as well. So, so custom orders are a way that retailers can get ahead if people are looking for certain things. A lot of the native plant parts will need a little notice for that too. So we usually do custom orders kind of due for October for spring, and even longer for some of these native plants that take a bit longer as well. So asking for specific plants or a specific purpose at a nursery, if we don't have exactly the one you're thinking of, there might be something similar that is still a native plant too that can cover that purpose as well. So for just the average retailer or retail customer, we do sell a lot of our plants to High Country Gardens, and they retail it online. So they have quite a big selection of native plants, and they're originally started growing in New Mexico, so that a lot of their stuff was not only drought tolerant but cold tolerant. High country sort of hints to that name there. So they do have a lot of selection, and the things that they grow, we also grow a little bit for us. Sometimes they work well for high country, and ironically, they don't sell for us either. So kind of figuring out who that clientele is. But yeah, we can go through some of the ones that are generally pretty available and easy to find that we try to have a lot on hand. So I'm actually going to try to show this as a little video just because this is Soul Dancer Tetraneris. And it's a great little plant, low growing, and you can kind of see why it's called Soul Dancer. It just kind of dances in the wind there. So that one I feel like is one we've found that's easy to grow from seed. It's available, and unless it's pre-sold, it has been pretty popular this year too. So let's get to the next one here. Penstemons are always a big, a really popular native plant selection. So tons of different sizes, varieties, colors. Pine leaf penstemons come in all of the different colors. Palmer's penstemons. Those ones are a little bit fussier, and you have to really try to ignore them. They don't like a lot of water. They don't like a lot of attention. So I think it's the same with houseplants sometimes, where they just get a little too much love. So some of these are just a little tougher than people want to give them credit for. So another one would be, so that's the Palmer's penstemon. Another one would be the blue mat penstemon, this one is becoming a little bit more available in the trade. And it's available on High Country Gardens as well. And this is a plant select selection. So it's got great little blue flowers, and it is very drought tolerant and just a low mat forming one. So it's great for, park strips and stuff like that. Bridges penstemon is another one that's really popular. We're growing a lot of that this year. Rostriflorus. So it's kind of got a nice time that it's in color that's a little bit later than some of the other ones. So you get that midsummer seasonal color. And another one that's really popular is just Penstemon strictus. This is actually the white version of it, which is called Blanca Peak, which is another plant select one. And it is the white one's becoming a little bit more available in the industry as well, but the purple one is great and reseeds and is tough as nails. So penstemons are always a good choice and fairly easy to find as well. So this is a little bit of an obscure one, and I'm trying not to show obscure ones, but this is available in High Country Gardens, and a new one that we've been growing for them this year. It's called Phimeranthus, and it's just got these great little flowers that are kind of like the Tetraneris, that are kind of held high above the foliage too, but it's a little succulent looking plant. It always stops people in the garden as well. Salvias are always a great one. There's a lot of hybrids and a lot of different adaptations to different, like zone 6, zone 5. I know that dark shadows and ultraviolets are a couple of my favorite ones. And then Zauschnerias or epilobiums, there's a lot of selection. Those ones are fabulous for ground cover. I've also found that they do pretty good in part shade, and there's a lot of different options on there too of colors. And this one is Stardust. It has a little bit more gray foliage to it, and then this is the orange carpet one. So, and I forgot to throw a picture in there, but we've got one that is a standout from perennial favorites that we call Woody's Peach, and it's kind of more pink flowers on them as well. So some fun, different colors on them. As far as shrubs go, there's a couple ones I'll just show here that are pretty available. The fern bush, the Camibadiaria. This one's a great pollinator plant, super drought tolerant. It is one that looks pretty crappy in a pot, though. It's one of those ones that like you kind of need to know that it's going to look good once you get it in the landscape. So I always see these at the end of the year in garden centers, and because they don't look great in a garden center, but they are available from High Country Gardens online, and just I think people knowing that once you get them in, they would look great would be a big help too. But that's kind of one of the other tricky parts with growing natives. So I'll just zoom through these real quick too. I think we're getting close to the end here. I'm going to leave some time for questions, but another one is mock orange, and this is kind of native to the Intermountain West, Pacific Northwest. A couple different varieties. Cheyenne's a pretty popular one. It's very drought tolerant and very cold tolerant, and the microphyllus has smaller leaves, so that would hint that it's a little bit more drought tolerant too. Just kind of the smaller leaf variation there. There's tons of grasses. I could probably do a whole talk on native grasses as well, but a couple of my favorites are the Blonde Ambition one that's really popular, and I think for a good reason too. It's Bouteillea gracilis, and it's just got these great little seed heads all summer long. And right next to it is a little bit later fall blooming one, but the Muhlenbergia. This is Undaunted. So we do sell both of these for perennial favorites, and then they're also available on High Country as well. And I'm not 100% sure behind it if that is the Lamus glauca, but Blue Basin Wild Rye is one of our, we do have a selection that we sell through perennial favorites that's more of a standout. It's a little bit bluer, one that we selected just for that color. So tons of cool plants out there. I did want to say, I know we have been growing natives for quite a while, but I know that it is something that people are always looking for and trying to find more. So as I start here ordering more plants and trying to figure out what we're growing for the next few years, it'd be nice to excuse me, hear back what people think or what people are having a hard time finding, what people really want to grow. And I'm always open to hearing from anyone that has any information on growing them, and sharing any information that we have on growing them too. I think the more natives that we can promote, the better it is, not just for water conservation, but just for the aesthetics of the landscape as well. So I think that's kind of all I have now. So I'd love to hear anybody's questions that you have. And thank you for listening to me rant about native plants.
No, that was awesome. And we do have questions both on chat and Q&A. Ben, do you want to get started with the Q&A thing?
Yeah. Yep. If you want to chime in with some from the chat, that would be great as well. So the first question that we had, and I think this was referring to, I think it was Richard Anderson, but could he dig up the whole plant to transplant it to the facility to review it locally, was the question. So I was in the presentation.
No, you have to get like permits and stuff to dig plants. So most of the stuff he's been doing, he has got permits before, but I think most of the stuff he's doing is taking cuttings and seeds and he's very careful about documenting where he gets those and making sure he has permission for it. But yeah, if it's on someone's personal land, he could, but if it's on public land, he wouldn't.
Okay, and then kind of a second question that goes with that one. Do you need special licenses or special permissions to go to gather cuttings or seeds of native plants? And if so, how do you go about acquiring those permissions?
That's a good question. I know it depends on where you go. And I know Larry Rupp, when I was working with COL, he was putting together a whole little brochure on that too, because there's lots of different rules about it. And I could get Richard's contact information too on there. Yeah, it just depends on if you're going to BLM land or private land and stuff too. But cuttings are usually okay. I think if you're, unless plants are not usually okay. The whole plant, digging that up.
Okay. All right. Then another question was, anytime in the future for direct to consumer sales, or do you have a list of garden centers that you offer your entire inventory to?
Yeah, depending on where you're located, like all of the garden centers have access to our whole availability. So, and our availability, you can just go onto our website and see what we have available. You can't purchase it as a whole unless you're a wholesaler. But yeah, I think on our website we do have a lot of the garden centers that we sell to, but a lot of garden centers will not just buy from us, but from a lot of different wholesalers too. So, you know, if you know we have something and you're looking for it, you can tell them and they can buy it from us. So
yeah, I think this was a wonderful presentation. Thanks, Adria.
Thank
yeah,
you.
See you next time.
Okay, thanks so much.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you all. Bye-bye.